Hello BookTube, let the bailing commence. I had a crappy reading weekend. Last week, when I previewed the books I would be reading for this week, I showed 4 works of general fiction. I bailed on 3 of them, and I decided not to even attempt the 4th because I was pretty sure I was nearing a bailing cascade. So I'm like, no. Anyway, so let's get to the bails first and then what I read over the course of the work week. So first up is Lot by Bryan Washington. This is his debut collection of short fiction. They are all set in and around the Houston area, and the stories primarily focus on Houstonians of color in disadvantaged neighborhoods. And while there's nothing wrong about Washington's prose, he's a good writer. And certainly his skills have improved with his first novel, Memorial. But the stories just don't really go anywhere. They're, in a way, character studies. There's nothing much in the way of plot, and they did nothing for me. So I decided to bail. I took a break, and then in the afternoon on Saturday, I started Alamo House by Sarah Byrd. This is a novel set in Austin in the late 80s, and it's about Mary Jo who would like her environment to be clean and not necessarily having to do all of the work to keep that environment clean, and her soon-to-be ex-boyfriend who doesn't particularly care whether his environment is dirty or not terribly cleaned, and isn't willing to go to the effort to actually clean. So Mary Jo is cycling along, and she spots Alamo House, which is the house for a sorority of graduate students at the University of Texas. And they offer basically what she wants, which is a clean environment in which everybody participates in keeping the house clean and running. And apparently at some point, her sorority, after she joins, gets into some conflict with a fraternity across the street who are basically her ex-boyfriend on steroids. And the humor did nothing for me. And the first-person narration is just rather cringeworthy. It's not done terribly well. So I decided to bail. The third bail, and this I started on Sunday, is The Namesake by Jubila Lahiri. This is about an Indian American who struggles with his identity, largely because his parents gave him one of the worst names imaginable. And while there is significance to the name for the father, it's still, a terrible name. And I read the first chapter, and I thought the writing was okay, probably better than okay, but I was just bored and uninterested. And going to look at a preview of like a synopsis on Wikipedia of what the novel is about, I lost any interest in reading this book. So anyway, third bell. So instead of kind of coming back and probably ending up bailing on Swimming in the Dark by Tomaz Jedrowski, I decided I'm going to call it, and I'm going to come back tomorrow and read some history, and hopefully a history will please me. But before I talk about what I read over the course of the work week, which if you've read one of my, or not read, seen one of my earlier videos, you know what I've been reading. I do want to talk about me and general fiction. To be honest, I don't really like it all that much. At best, it really doesn't do anything for me. And a work of general fiction that I actually like only shows up once in a blue moon. It is incredibly rare. And I haven't really looked into my reading diary or my reading lists over the past few years to really see, okay, this is a work of general fiction and this is what I thought of it. But for the most part, pretty much every work of general fiction I've read, however you define general fiction, because it is an incredibly nebulous genre, hasn't really worked for me. And I bail on them pretty much out of hand. So I think after this debacle, I'm going to not read any more general fiction for a while. Hopefully distance will make the heart grow fonder, or I just, not deal with them anymore. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with this bookcase here. Currently, that's where I house my general fiction and I think 2 more literary historical fiction works. Right now I have no real pressing need to purge them from my collection. I have enough space. I have a whole free bookshelf here and up here. I have a little shelf full, empty. And then this bookcase here, the one under it's got some space, and I still have some space for science fiction and fantasy. So, so I don't know about necessarily purging all of the general fiction books from my collection. But, for now, I think I'm just going to not read any general fiction. So anyway, and I might talk a bit more about this sometime next week, because I do want to do a deeper dive on my relationship with general fiction. So hopefully I will do that sometime next week. And if not, I'll, So, let me check these texts real quick. So, my sister-in-law. Anyway. So, what have I been reading this past work week? I've been reading Streams of Gold, Rivers of Blood by Anthony Kaldellis. This is a history of the Byzantine Empire, or the Eastern Roman Empire, or as they would have considered themselves, the Roman Empire, from the 950s to the 1070s, or really early 1080s. From the later part of the Macedonian dynasty to the beginning of the Komnenos, hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, dynasty. There are parts of this that I really enjoyed. There are stretches of the narrative history that I quite enjoy. Kaldellis focuses primarily on the military aspects of this period of Byzantine history, from the brief sort of Byzantine expansion in the late 900s and early 1000s to the beginnings of the permanent Byzantine contraction in the later 1000s or 11th century. I mean, there are some parts of the narrative that I think, or the history that I thought were really interesting. Kaldellis' argument that the reason for the Byzantine collapse wasn't the feudalization of the Byzantine Empire, that this is a relatively recent fiction, kind of a 20th century fiction. And there are some other really interesting bits as well. But there are some parts of the history that I'm not entirely pleased with, particularly Kaldellis' treatment of the Empress's regnant during this period. Zoe doesn't have her own little section. She seems to be more of a cipher, and while, yes, Theodora and Eudoxia do get some sections, I don't think any of their contributions to Byzantine history and Byzantine governance is really all that apparent. And I think Kaldellis could have dived deeper into that. And also, at the end of each section, he does a general kind of wrapping up and a general sort of rehashing of earlier chapters, and I thought that was a bit repetitive and probably didn't need to be there. So anyway, so in general, quite a mixed, I think, opinion of Streams of Gold, Rivers of Blood. Certainly, I think the book is going to be very sort of influential. It gave me tons of ideas, but I didn't really love it. In the way I've come to hope that the history books that I read kind of affect that me loving reading them. This was mostly just giving me ideas. So what am I going to be reading this following week? So this weekend I'm going to be reading The 100 Years War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. And I will be, during the course of the work week, I will be reading Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker for the BookTube Prize. And so a quick rundown of my plans for the BookTube Prize. So this work week I will start with Hidden Valley Road, and that way once the next weekly reads comes around, I'll be able to talk about the 100 Years War on Palestine and then defer Hidden Valley Road until the end of March or beginning of April, depending when the octafinals or results are announced. This next weekend, I will be reading What is in the Grass by Mark Doty for the BookTube Prize, and then read something, I'm not entirely sure what yet, during the course of that work week. And then the following weekend, I will be reading Square Haunting by Francesca Wade. And that'll be the last book for the BookTube Prize, and yeah, I can get my results in to Robert. And then at the end of March or beginning of April, the results will be announced. And I will talk about all of the books in greater detail then, obviously. As far as March Mystery Madness is concerned and March of the Mammoths, I'll talk about my TBR probably on Monday. I have an idea of what I'm going to do for the Mystery Madness. Obviously, I've been working my way through the Christie Omnibus, so I'll continue with that. I'm not entirely sure what I want to do about March of the Mammoth. I'd originally planned on reading Iran by Abbas Amenat, but I think I'm going to hold off. I don't think I quite want to have another go at him for a while, so I'm going to look around my science fiction and fantasy shelves and see if I can find something there that grabs my fancy for March of the Mammoth. And I'll talk about that on Monday. So what have I been watching? Quite a lot. So last Friday I watched The Umbrellas of Cherbourg and Thelma and Louise. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg is a French musical, really cinematic opera, starring Catherine Deneuve and Nino Castelnuovo as two young lovers, Genevieve and Guy. Genevieve's mother owns a boutique umbrella store called The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and Guy is a mechanic. And they're pretty much beginning their love during the Algerian War, and Guy is conscripted. And the musical goes from there. And I quite liked it, particularly the colors, the imagery, setting. I quite enjoyed sort of the scene and all of that, and the music. And Thelma and Louise, I really enjoyed as well. And for once, TCM did not screw up. I thought in Thelma and Louise stars Gina Davis as Thelma and Susan Sarandon as Louise. I thought the beginning of the film was a bit rough. I mean, the acting was rough, the narrative was uncertain, but I think as Thelma's character becomes stronger, becomes more assertive, knows who she is and what she wants, that I think the movie really sort of finds its stride. And that I thought was really fun to watch that progression. On Saturday, I continued on with Jessica Jones, which I really liked the main plot, Jessica Jones's investigation into her own origins. I thought that was really interesting. I'm not entirely fond of Jessica Jones always being this Jessica Jones that we've seen. But anyway, and I also really like Malcolm and Trish's character arcs. I'm not entirely fond of Jerry Hogarth's arc, and the romance arc is, just terrible. And the kid, okay. And then on Sunday, I didn't watch Ice Fantasy. Steve Donahue had about 100 Q&A videos, so I watched those instead. Also, I was feeling a bit depressed. Usually if I have a Bellapalooza, there's some depression following it too, so I took a break on Sunday. And then on Thursday, I watched Juliet of the Spirits, starring Giulietta Messina as Juliet, or Giulietta. And I liked it. I mean, it is one of my favorite movies. I love the color. I love the fantastical elements of the novel. Or the movie. I love the setting, particularly Susie's mansion. But I'm not entirely sure the plot really holds up. Although of course the point of the movie is more Juliet's character development. So, yeah. And today I watched episode 8 of WandaVision, and whew, that was great. Such an amazing show. I'm curious to see how they wrap everything up. And the only pity is, I think, or only frustration is that really this is it for Scarlet Witch and Elizabeth Olsen. She's likely not to get another TV series, let alone a movie, to be the primary character. And that is such a shame. And even in the Marvel Comics, she has been sorely underutilized for decades now. But definitely, WandaVision is amazing. And this episode, just wonderful. So what am I going to be watching tonight? I'm thinking of watching I Am Michael and maybe Boys in the Band. I'm not entirely sure. I also want to watch some booktube videos because part of the problem of my weekend television or movie, TV show watching is that it takes some time away from watching booktube videos, and by the time the following week rolls around, I'm behind and I miss a lot of good stuff. So I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do. I'll tell you next weekly reads. Saturday I'm going to hopefully try to finish off Jessica Jones. And then hopefully Sunday I'll be able to get back to Ice Fantasy, although I think there's going to be another massive Steve Donahue Q&A, which might sort of disrupt that. And then I'm not entirely sure about the work week, whether I'll try to find a movie to watch then. I'm going to go look on TCM's website and see what they have coming up and make notes of it and see if there's anything interesting. And then on next Friday will be the finale of WandaVision, and I cannot wait. I'm so excited to see how they wrap everything up. So anyway, BookTube, this is going on a bit too long, and I think I'm starting to ramble, so I'm going to sign off for now. Thank you. Have a great evening and weekend, and stay safe, and I will hopefully see you on Monday. And if not that, definitely Tuesday for a tag. But I also want to do the March Mystery Madness and March of the Mammoths TBR. So anyway, I'll see you next week. Thank you, BookTube.